Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. Many of you may have noticed that I don't normally respond to extra credits' videos that discuss history, right? Well, the reason for that is simple. When they approach history, they don't usually do badly. The problem that often comes off is not that they get historical information wrong, but that they present it in a manner that is disingenuous, where they clearly want the listener to walk away with a particular viewpoint rather than just with the facts. And while that's annoying, it usually isn't worth a full video response to just say, "You're right, but you said it wrong." I'd be met with a ton of criticism saying that I'm nitpicking, so I tend to just not bother with their historical stuff unless they straight up get facts wrong, right? In this instance, I'm going to make an exception though. I have grown weary of the Spartan slander, so I wish to respond to this short that they released having to do with the prelude to the Second Greco-Persian War. Now, funny enough, back in the day, a long time ago during the old narrator, they did a video series on the Second Greco-Persian War and the Battle of Thermopylae having to do with the real ideals behind the Spartans and the Persians and what really happened during that time period. But this portion that they're talking about was not featured in that original video series, so I thought this would be very interesting to take a look at. I'm going to walk through this video step by step to correct and add context to their claims, as I feel they don't do the Spartans justice here, so let's get started. Oh wait, before I do, I better change my avatar for this, huh? But I don't have a Spartan warrior avatar. I need to talk to Hannah about that, or maybe Jay. Oh well, I'll substitute with this. There we go. That'll do, I think. All right, rock on.
Remember that classic moment in the film 300 when Leonidas shouts, "This is Sparta!" and then promptly kicks a Persian ambassador into a hole? Well, that's actually based on a real-life historical event, but 300 doesn't show you what happened next. 7 years later, the Persian Emperor Xerxes announced he was going to invade Greece, and Sparta freaked out, because in the ancient world, messengers were under divine protection, and Sparta's elders thought the invasion might be punishment from the gods for the messenger murder.
This is not entirely accurate. See, okay, here's the full context. When King Darius of Persia sent his heralds to Sparta and Athens, he actually sent them to all of the Greek city-states, and he was asking them for soil and water. He was essentially asking them to submit themselves to him and agree not to stand against him. It's essentially a pledge of surrender. Athens held the heralds and put them on trial before executing them, and Sparta just straight up threw them down a well. Darius still went forward with his invasion, but was then defeated at the Battle of Marathon. But years later, when Xerxes took the throne, he didn't even bother sending heralds to Athens or Sparta because of what happened with his father, so he just said he would invade anyway. The way Extra Credits phrases this is that they're basically showing that the Spartans thought the invasion was divine punishment for killing the heralds or something. But the fact is, we don't know if that was the case. What we do know, based on the histories of Herodotus, is that Spartans did hold heralds as sacred. They had a shrine dedicated to Talthybius, the Lord of Heralds. Because of their crime against the heralds, the Spartans could not obtain good omens from sacrifice and offerings, and, according to Herodotus' Book 7 in the Histories, he writes, quote, "Now after that deed, the Spartans could not win good omen from sacrifice, and for a long time it was so. The Lacedaemonians, which is another name for the Spartans, were grieved and dismayed. Oftentimes they called assemblies and made a proclamation inviting some Lacedaemonians to give their life for Sparta." So clearly the Spartans were all feeling very guilty about what they had done for some time, and it's highly possible that they were simply trying to rectify a past sin here, not trying to placate anyone. And you'll see why in a moment.
So they hatched a plan to fix it. They would send a Spartan warrior to Xerxes as a sacrifice. That way, when Xerxes killed him, the offense against the gods would be repaid, right? I mean, that's just math. Of course, being Spartans, there was a big argument about who would get to make this heroic sacrifice, but when the dust settled, they actually let 2 volunteers go.
Well, there was no argument. The 2 men elected themselves because of their high station and wealth. As Herodotus writes, quote, "Then 2 Spartans of noble birth and great wealth, Sphertheus, son of Anertius, and Bulas, son of Nicolaus, undertook of their own free will that they would make atonements to Xerxes for Darius's heralds who had been done to death at Sparta. Thereupon the Spartans sent these men to Media for executions." End quote. There is no reference to a great argument or struggle, simply 2 men electing to be sacrificed. Now, Extra Credits is going to jump ahead at this point to where the Spartans appear before Xerxes, but Herodotus actually provides more that happens before that. Herodotus writes as follows, quote, As they journeyed to Susa, they came to Hydarnes, a Persian who was general of the seacoast of Asia. He entertained and feasted them as guests, and as they sat at his board, Lacedaemonians, he questioned them, why do you shun the king's friendship? You can judge from what you see of me and my condition how well the king can honor men of worth. So might it be with you. Would you but put yourselves in the king's hands, being as you are of proven worth in his eyes, every one of you might be his commission, be a ruler of Hellas. To this the Spartans answered, your counsels to us, Hydarnes, are ill assorted. One half of them rests on knowledge, but the other on ignorance. You know well how to be a slave, but you have never tasted of freedom to know whether it be sweet or not. Were you to taste of it, not with spears, you would counsel us to fight for it. No, you would not counsel us to fight with spears, but with axes. End quote. Now, those who didn't quite follow that, I will translate essentially what happened. The two Spartans first came into Susa, where they met a Persian general who offered to dine with them and told them that they need not throw their lives away and that they can merely placate Xerxes and convince their leaders to do the same, and they'll all be given a station like he is. You'll be as well off as me, right? And to this they said, your counsel is ill-assorted, for you only know how to live as a slave under Xerxes, and have not tasted freedom as we have. Had you tasted freedom as we have, you would counsel us not to take up spears to defend freedom, but axes to defend it. In other words, no way in hell. Now, I want this point made clear. The Spartans were not cowardly trying to placate anyone. They were trying to right a past wrong of their own in the eyes of the gods. They were not here to win over Xerxes for his mercy. They weren't trying to beg him to show forgiveness or to not do his invasion. They were simply here saying, we made a mess up in the past, according to the gods. We want to fix it. Okay? All right, let's keep going.
Arriving at the Persian court, they gained an audience with Xerxes and begged with total earnest sincerity to be killed.
Again, this is not quite accurate. Begging? This kneeling they're doing? No. In fact, Herodotus makes it clear they refuse to beg or kneel. He writes, again, quote, thence being come to Susa and into the king's presence, when the guards commanded and would have compelled them to fall down into obeisance to the king, they said they would never do that, no, not if they were thrust down headlong. For it was not their custom, said they, to do obeisance to mortal men, nor was that the purpose of their coming. Having beaten that off, they next said, the Lacedaemonians have sent us, O king of the Medes, and requital for the slaying of your heralds at Sparta to make atonement for their death. Again, for those who don't know what was just said, I'll help you out. When the two arrived before the king, his guards tried to force them to kneel and grovel before him, but they refused, and even apparently beat back their attempt, saying it was not their custom to grovel before mortal men, nor was that their intention here. Then they follow that up by saying that they were sent to make up for the deaths of the Persian heralds years ago. Note, there is no begging, there is no pleading or scraping, merely a statement. We've come for a purpose, to make up for a past sin. Kindly do this. They were not begging, they were not pleading, they were not groveling. They were just saying, here's what we're here to do, please accept this. It paints a much more different picture, doesn't it, than what EC's painting here, right?
And how did Xerxes respond? By laughing his head off and sending them away very much unexecuted.
Okay, so Herodotus writes, whereupon Xerxes of his magnanimity said that he would not imitate the Lacedaemonians. For you, said he, made havoc of all human law by slaying heralds. But I will not do that which I blame in you, nor by putting you to death set the Lacedaemonians free from this guilt. So allow me to translate. Xerxes looked them in the eye and said, I'm not going to repay what you did for an equal wickedness. What you did was wrong and against the human law, and I will not repay that sin here, nor will I remove you of the guilt you carry. He did not laugh at them. He did not mock them. He merely stated clearly, I don't accept your offering. Now get out of here and prepare for me to invade your lands. Now again, some of you might be thinking, Raven, this feels really nitpicky. I understand. But you must recognize that Extra Credits is trying to paint a picture here. They're trying to set up a viewpoint that they want you to accept. That the Spartans were terrified of the oncoming Persians and were quickly trying to make up with them by sending men to die and beg them not to come. And the Persians just laughed at this, as if it was ridiculous to even consider to them, thus putting them on a higher moral pedestal and then sent them home. That is not the case. What we have here is something far more complex and deep than simple cowardice and mockery, and I want to make that clear.
For more ways the Battle of Thermopylae was way better than the movie, click the link below.
Okay, first of all, let me do what Extra Credits did not, and I'll actually tell you what happened according to Herodotus. He writes, thus by this deed of the Spartans, the wrath of Talthybius was appeased for the nonce, though Sphetherus and Bullus returned to Sparta. So even though they were not executed, the ill omens of Sparta were abated and the offerings were accepted by the Talthybians. So the Spartans were not pissing themselves or living in terror that their men had returned. They then end the video by pointing you to the original 2-part video series about the Battle of Thermopylae, in which the short story is actually not shared. Now that 2-part series that they're pointing you to, I actually recommend. It's far older and done by the old narrator, and it's handled with far more grace and academic skill. It looks at things from a non-biased perspective, showing the Spartans and the Persians in a very unbiased light. Now, the problem with this short, though, is how it portrays not only the Spartans, but also Xerxes. It presents the Spartans as cowardly, needlessly brutal, and having to even fight amongst each other just for the right to kill themselves, and it also presents them as kowtowing and groveling when that was not the case. But further, it portrays Xerxes in an insulting way too. They portray Xerxes as a man who would laugh at this show of admonition. He either doesn't care about the loss of his men and sees this behavior as foolish, or he's so morally superior to the Spartans that he doesn't even understand their logic in wanting to offer a life for a life, which is the very foundation of justice. Xerxes, historically, fully understood what this offering meant, but he refused to accept it because he had beef with Sparta and Athens, and he was not going to placate them. In a way, I almost think Sparta knew this might happen. As you'll note, despite them returning, the offerings were still accepted. My guess is the Spartans just wanted to show that they remember the past and wanted to subtly remind Xerxes that they have good memories, and they also likely just wanted to appease the priests who were shunning their recent sacrifices. Now, I can't be sure of this, but it makes far more sense to me than whatever this was. This was pitiful. It was disingenuous, and it was just silly. The reason I felt the need to respond to this video is because of the way that Extra Credits approached this topic. Again, it's not that they were entirely wrong, and I do think it's good to tell further information about the Greco-Persian War, because this story that they just shared was not in the original video series that was done by the old narrator. But I feel it essential that truth takes center stage without presenting what appears to be a rather clear narrative being spun that presents the Spartans in a weak and negative light with the Persians as more magnanimous and moral. Context must be understood, or else truth is lost to misunderstanding. So, moral of the story? Go watch the original talk on Thermopylae given by Extra Credits way back in the day, the 2-part series. It's very good, very informative. I actually really like it. I think it handles everything with pretty good grace. This right here, this short, don't take it seriously. Actually read Herodotus, understand what really happened. This just painted a narrative that you don't really need to see, okay? This narrative is very biased. It doesn't make either side look good. This is one of the reasons why I just don't enjoy watching their history stuff anymore, okay? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little short dive into a short video from Extra Credits, which, left me a little short. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.